Hello everyone, my name is Liv and welcome to another recent reads. So I am up to 70 books. So for today I'm going to be talking about my 61st book to my 70th read. I will be sure to link all my other previous recent reads down below if you want to see the other books that I have read throughout 2019 and if you want to see my thoughts about them. Let's start with my 61st read. So the 61st book that I read in 2019 was Flashed by Zoey Castile, and this is a wonderful romance novel, a part of the Happy Endings series, and this follows a previous stripper who lives in Montana after going through a very bad accident. He kind of becomes a recluse and he very much is alone in his new mansion that he bought in Montana, so he decides to hire someone to help him around the house. So he hires Lena, and Lena is a college student who needs some extra money to help support her sister because her sister's mother is not a very good mother and she needs to support her sister. So this is what I would call a very soft retelling of Beauty and the Beast, because we have this man who is a recluse, he likes to live alone, he's very grumpy, and then we have this wonderful, artistic, and just positive light who sparks a relationship with Patrick, and they both find hope and love with each other. This is definitely my favorite in the Happy Endings series, and it was just such a well-written novel, and Zoey Castile is such a wonderful romance author, and she is very underrated, and I wish more people would read her series and her books because they are so beautifully written and they have such warm characters who have such pure romances, and it's just beautiful and lovely, and I flew through this. It was definitely one of my favorite romances of 2019. The next book I read I saw in Barnes & Noble's with my best friend. We both saw the cover, we were both drawn to the cover, and we read the synopsis of the book, and I thought to myself, I have to take this out from the library. So I took it out from my library and read it in a day and a half and absolutely adored it. It's definitely one of my favorite reads of 2019, and it is The Memory Police. The Memory Police is set on an island that is unnamed, following unnamed characters who have their memories altered every couple of days, months, or weeks. So the synopsis says, on an unnamed island off of an unnamed coast, things are disappearing. First animals and flowers, then objects, ribbons, bells, photographs, then body parts. Most of the island's inhabitants fail to notice these changes, while those few endued with the power to recall the lost objects live in fear of the mysterious memory police, who are committed to ensuring that the disappeared remain forgotten. So it's somewhat of an Orwellian dystopian novel following a group of people, and they are grappling with the fact that every couple of days, months, or weeks, something will disappear from their life, and they have to figure out what that is. So one day they'll wake up and they know that something has disappeared from their memory, but they don't know what it is. So one day it could just be roses. Roses and the concept of roses and the feelings that they have towards roses have disappeared from their memory. And then it'll be something like photographs. So once photographs disappear from their memory, they have no particular attachment to it, so then they destroy every single photograph on the island, so then they could thus forget it. And the whole concept of the memory police is that there's this one woman who is losing all her memories along with everyone else, but she is working to hide someone who does still remember every single thing that's disappearing, which is very dangerous, and they can be taken away by the government because they're remembering the things that are supposed to be lost and forgotten. The Memory Police is such an atmospheric and innovative and beautifully written novel in such a simplistic way. It's something that I can overanalyze for hours upon hours, and I just highly recommend it to every single person who loves dystopian or literary fiction. It was such a interesting read that I didn't think would affect me so much, but after reading it I just can't stop thinking about it. And I really enjoyed the fact that most of the novel is told through internal dialogue, so it's mainly stuck in the head of this one woman who is losing all these memories, but she's also trying to hide someone who can remember everything that's disappearing. It was just so good. I don't know how to describe it. I will link my review for it down below because I feel like my review and those immediate thoughts I had after finishing that novel were just the best way I could describe my feelings for that book. But one thing that I do enjoy the most about this book is the fact that it is a quiet drama. I read an article and they were describing The Memory Police and they call it a quiet drama, where there's not a lot of action, there's not a lot of conflict, but it's a drama that just quietly unfolds, and you're unfolding in a way that you're only following one particular character, and it's just very dramatic but in a very subtle way. And it is definitely a read that I will never get out of my mind. It's just something that will always be swirling in my mind that I will always recommend to people because it was so amazing, the concept was amazing, and I just cannot recommend it enough. The next read I got from the author himself, and it is The Book of Lost Saints by Daniel José Older, and this is a Cuban-American story following a boy named Ramon. He is getting these weird dreams about an aunt. She disappeared way before he was born, and he is getting these weird like dreams about her life and flashbacks to her life, and he's wondering how that's happening, and he wants to learn more about her life and why she disappeared during the Cuban Revolution. So not only do we get to see Ramon, who is a Cuban American, but we also get to see Marisol, who is a Cuban who was living during the Cuban Revolution. So this book is very interesting because it's told from the point of view of Marisol. She is kind of like an omnipresent third-person narrator of this entire story, and she is trying to send these messages of her past and of her life and what happened to her to Ramon in hopes that he will figure out the truth about her disappearance. At first, I was very much confused reading the book because I wasn't sure who I was following because it is third person and I don't mesh well with third person, but once I got into the gist of it, then I got into the story, and it was such an amazing story. It follows Ramon's life in America, it follows Marisol's life in Cuba during the Cuban Revolution, so we get to see these very different perspectives of Cubans in different time periods, and we also get to see Ramon trying to connect with his Cuban heritage and his past and his family and just to learn more about them. And while I was reading this book, I was so into it, and I was like, this book is a good book. It's a good book. It's not my favorite Cuban book in the world, but once I got towards the end, I was just hooked to the point where I put down the book after I finished it and I just cried. I just felt like I had all these emotions bubbling up while I was reading this book, and I was reading about Ramon, who is a Cuban American, and then we get to see his relative from the past living in Cuba during the Cuban Revolution, and that very much mirrors my life as a Cuban as well. So just reading about those two differing perspectives and how they clash together, it kind of hit like a little bit too close to home, and I was like, wow, like it was just a lot for me. And one thing that I do really enjoy about this book is the fact that there are so many Cuban references and Cuban phrases and Cuban culture woven into this narrative, and the Spanish dialogue that is effortlessly and seamlessly thrown into this novel is not italicized. It just feels natural, but it was just such a wonderful Cuban story about two different generations and how they affect each other and how generational trauma just like affects generations. And Daniel José Older is just such an amazing writer, and it was such a beautiful book. It was a lot to take in, but I'm so glad I read it because you get to learn about family, you get to learn about the past of a Cuban living during the Cuban Revolution, and you get to see someone in the present as a Cuban. So it was really amazing and I really loved it. The next book I read was a poetry collection, and it is To Drink Coffee with a Ghost by Amanda Lovelace, and I was given this by Andrew McMeals. So thank you so much to them. And I am such a fan of Amanda Lovelace. She is just so talented with her writing and her ability to tell a story within a poetry collection. So this follows her relationship with her mother who has passed away and how she's grappling with the grief and just like the presence of her mother in her life, in her memory. And it was just so well done, and it is so relatable, and it just holds a mirror up to your own life when you're reading this, because you can always find a way to relate to Amanda Lovelace's poetry. And this poetry collection also has some beautiful art in it as well that I really enjoyed seeing. I just loved it. It was great. It was a wonderful poetry collection. The next book I read was Somewhere Only We Know by Maurene. Maurene is definitely an auto-buy author for me. Her contemporaries and her young adult novels are just written so cutely, and they're just very light and lovely, and I just love her writing so much because she has some quirky, weird characters, but they also have like a very important story to tell. This follows a girl named Lucky, who is a Korean pop star. She escapes from her hotel room one night to just explore Hong Kong. And while she's exploring Hong Kong, she bumps into a boy named Jack, and he is actually a paparazzo, but he does not let her know that. So he's kind of trying to hide the fact that he's a paparazzo, and he doesn't realize that she is the Lucky, the K-pop idol, until later on when they're hanging out with each other in Hong Kong, and then he realizes, hey, I can do a really cool exclusive story if I get a couple photos with her, if I hang out with her for the rest of the night. But while he's trying to do that and he's trying to be a little bit deceptive, he does fall for Lucky because they both connect over their lives and how they're very much different but also somewhat the same. And it was just such a wonderful novel. It spoke a lot about the good and the bad of K-pop. It spoke a lot about following your dreams and being afraid to follow your dreams, but you have to follow your dreams. You can't just be stagnant and do things because they are safe. You have to push the boundaries in your life. It's also talking about defying the expectations of your parents. It's also talking about anxiety. It just puts so many different pieces of people's everyday lives, and Maurene Gu put it together in a wonderful novel centered around K-pop, centered around these two people falling in love during one night. It's a Roman holiday retelling, which if you have not seen, I would highly recommend. But it was just so well executed. It gave me the Roman holiday feels, and it also just felt so right. Like, I know that they're falling in love within one day, and I know that that can be seen as unrealistic, but the way that it's done and the way that it's also a retelling of Roman holiday makes it feel right, because these characters have such deep conversations and different circumstances where they get to grow closer to each other throughout the day, and they just do so many different activities exploring Hong Kong. It was such a wonderful contemporary, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it did Roman holiday justice, and I thought it was really cute. The next book I read was on audiobook, and it is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim, and this is a courtroom drama following the aftermath of an explosion that killed a couple of people. This is a very difficult book to explain because the science behind this explosion is weird, but these people go into this bunker in this property that are owned by a Korean family, and they go into this bunker and they breathe in pure oxygen, and people say that that pure oxygen can help heal, can help cure diseases and disabilities. A specific group of people do it mostly every single week, and one day that oxygen tank explodes and kills a bunch of people within the tank. So the courtroom drama follows the aftermath of that, and they are charging the mother of one of the kids who goes into the tank with the murder of everyone in that tank, because she has a child who is autistic, and people were saying that she wanted to get rid of her son because he was a burden to her. So it explores that lady's story. It explores the Korean family who owns the property, who has to deal with the aftermath of like losing their business. It deals with people who also entered into the tank, and it's just a very interesting audiobook to read. There's so many different elements to it now that I think about it and I'm trying to explain it to you. I would say it's not my favorite courtroom drama, not my favorite mystery and like thriller, because the plot twist wasn't gasp-inducing for me. It didn't make me feel surprised. I just felt like, oh, okay, like that's the plot twist. Like, I could see that happening. I feel like if there was a different plot twist, I would have been more surprised, but the twist that the author decided to put onto the story just didn't really surprise me. So it was a good audiobook, but I wouldn't be like, this is my favorite audiobook of the year. The next book I took out from my library, and it was Serious Moonlight by Jenn Bennett. So I asked people on Twitter one day, I wanted to read a book that has a murder mystery party into it, and I wish that there were books centered around like our love for Clue, and someone recommended Serious Moonlight, which is about a girl who is suspicious of every single person in the world because she wants to become a detective, and I'm like, wow, relatable. So she decides to work for a hotel, and she does the graveyard shift. So she's working throughout the night in this weird hotel, and she meets this boy who she previously hooked up with like a couple days before, and she finds out that he also works at the hotel. So she has to deal with the fact that she's working at this hotel at a very inconvenient time. She's trying to become more independent now that she's 18, but she's also dealing with the fact that this boy that she previously hooked up with is working at the hotel, and the boy that she hooked up with knows that she loves mystery, so he's like, hey, there's this weird guest in the hotel, and I think we should investigate him because I think he is this author who has always remain anonymous, and we should see whether or not he is that author. So they both team up to investigate that author and to see whether or not that person is the actual anonymous author. It was a cute contemporary, but it wasn't my favorite because it was very much long-winded and the romance wasn't like completely there for me, and it did have a murder mystery party, although I wish it lasted longer rather than just having it for a couple of chapters. But I will say that the mystery itself, like them investigating the author, kind of fell flat towards the end of the book and then randomly picked up. The pacing was a little bit off for the book. It was alright. The next book I read was a graphic novel that I took out from my library as well, and it is called Pumpkinheads. Pumpkinheads is an adorable graphic novel centered around autumn. It follows a girl named Deja and a boy named José. They work at a pumpkin patch every single year, but they're not necessarily friends outside of the pumpkin patch. So once it's not fall, they don't really talk to each other. This is the last year before they go off to college, and José has always had a crush on another girl in the pumpkin patch. So Deja's like, well, this is our last night in the pumpkin patch. Let's do all we can to get you to help meet that girl, and you could tell her how you feel about her. Basically, the whole graphic novel is them running through the pumpkin patch, seeing all the different activities, going through all the different food stands, and just doing a bunch of different shenanigans to try and get to this girl. And it was just one of my favorite graphic novels ever. It was so cute. I read it right before autumn began, and it was just the perfect book to read before autumn because it gets you into the autumnal spirit, and all the little autumnal details in it, like the foods and the activities, were so cute. I loved it. It was great. I highly recommend it. The last two books for this recent reads are also graphic novels. I read them all in my library in like one sitting. And the first one is Anya's Ghost, and I know everyone has read this graphic novel if you're like recommending like young adult graphic novels. And this is a story basically about a girl who is very rebellious, and one day she falls down a well on her way home from school, and she finds a ghost, and the ghost kind of becomes attached to her, and the ghost tries to get her to do a bunch of different rebellious things to break the rules, like cheating on tests. Anya begins to realize that this ghost is trying to take over her life. I tried to enjoy it, but I didn't really enjoy the whole entire premise. I didn't know that's what Anya's Ghost was about. So while the art style was really nice and very monochrome, it wasn't my favorite graphic novel. I think I just didn't mesh well with the story. I know a lot of other people really enjoyed Anya's Ghost and really enjoyed the storyline and the art, but it didn't mesh well with me. And that goes for the next graphic novel as well. I finally read Check Please, which is about a boy who is a vlogger, and he goes to college on a scholarship, and he joins the hockey team, and he's very much a soft boy. He likes to bake. He's very just soft and pure and lovely, and all the other hockey players, well, like, you know, hockey players, they're like very tough, they're very masculine, and he's very much different from them, but they do accept him, and it just follows their lives as hockey players. I think I didn't really enjoy this novel because there were so many characters that I had to follow, and because it's very much centered around hockey, and I should have realized that I wouldn't like it before. But I did read Fence, which is about fencing, and I enjoyed that, but I didn't enjoy Check Please as much as I wanted to. So those are all the books that I read recently. I am up to 70 books now, and I hope you enjoyed hearing all my thoughts about these books. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know if you want to read any of these books. If you have any questions about the books in particular, I'll be sure to answer them down below. And if you want to see more from me, be sure to hit the bell icon because that will tell you every time I upload, which is usually every Sunday. I hope you have a good day. Bye!